Hi everyone, my name is Luan. I identify as Vietnamese and I am dedicating this conversation to all the instructor and future teacher because you guys will be the one to be building our future leaders. So what is your experience with assumption that are made by being Asian?
So because I'm Middle Eastern, people don't often think that we face the same struggles as the rest of the Asian community, but that's not true. All of the young people of our community, of the Middle Eastern community, know that the only way to become successful in the eyes of our parents is to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And there's no such thing as a Middle Eastern family that doesn't expect their children to be top of their class in every subject.
I've experienced many assumptions in like a school environment. Um, and those assumptions would be that everyone who is like Asian is naturally smarter and they are just naturally gifted. And so they don't have to try as hard and they sort of just excel in every subject. But for example, I didn't really excel that great in math in middle school, and a lot of peers would think that I wasn't truly Asian.
So now we'll move on to the third question, which is what is your experience with being harmed by racism?
So one thing that comes to mind is an example that was caused by the pandemic. So in the early weeks of quarantine, we saw in the news a lot of people being harmed around the nation because they were Asian. So I saw like children being cut and the elderly being like kicked in the face at bus stops, even religious buildings being vandalized. And so I run cross country and track year round. And so running is something that I have to do daily just to stay in shape. But at the beginning of quarantine, my parents had to really make a choice if they were going to allow me to run in my own neighborhood because they were afraid for my safety. And at the time, I didn't really agree with them. But now I realize that, well, I didn't agree with them because I thought it was crazy that I could be harmed just for being Asian, even when I didn't do anything. I also think back to a time in middle school in seventh grade at lunch. Me and my friends were teasing each other and joking around. And I remember one of my friends made a joke about how small my eyes were. And so, of course, I laughed it off, but it stuck with me throughout the day. And so when I got home, I remember running to the mirror and trying to figure out a way that I could smile so that my eyes wouldn't squint as much. And I remember realizing back then that I had a couple of Filipino friends that never really got made fun of for having Asian eyes. And I realized it was because their eyes were bigger than mine. And so I found a way that if I raised my eyebrows a little bit, my eyes would become bigger and it would look more like their eye shape. And I can look back in middle school, the photos, and I can see myself doing that a little bit. Um, but even though I wasn't being like bullied physically, I realized now that it did a lot more damage than I originally thought because that day I made a mental connection that me being Asian was something that was negative.
For our next question would be, what does it mean to you to be labeled as a model minority? And are you familiar with the term?
Labeled as a model minority, I find has a lot of like different levels of toxicity. Much like my other student panel members have talked about, there's like a common trend of silent struggle, and it's really hard to either go and ask for help because there's like this trend of expectations of being a perfectionist or being, better than other people. And I find that with myself, it's really hard again to ask for help, and I find that sometimes. Uh, Kind of like within family, you're comparing yourself against others. I used to compare myself against my cousins. I have someone who works in Google, a cousin that is a successful lawyer who met Obama before he was president, and I have another that's a pretty successful businessman. And it makes me feel a little inferior when I compare myself against others because under the model minority, you feel like you have to be either equal to their standards or better of where their successes and things like that. And like it's just kind of hard to be unique in your own sense and have your own individualism and being able to express yourself other than your given expectations.
Our next question is what or who has been the most helpful for you in becoming an empowered young person?
For me, my school's community and teachers have had a huge impact on making me feel more comfortable with who I am and acknowledging and celebrating my cultural differences and ethnicity. just the way they support everyone, and they they're open-minded to every student's difficulties and issues. They're more than just a teacher. They're there to guide you, and it really helps.
For me, my sophomore humanities teacher played a big role in me being here today. All my life, school came pretty easy to me, and so I was able to skate by pretty much doing the bare minimum, which also meant that I felt like a lot of my teachers never really challenged me, and they never pushed me, they also didn't give me any opportunities to go the extra mile. But in my sophomore year, my humanities teacher actually sat down with me, and she talked to me about my goals outside of high school. She asked me about what kind of person do I want to be and how did I plan on getting there, and that was like really cool to me that she actually cared that much about me succeeding. And she also played a big role in all of us starting an Asian club at our school, which not only helps us empower each other, but it was also a big deal to me because I was able to start embracing my culture and being proud that I was Asian. I also want to mention my parents. Basically, they were raised to keep their head down and be silent. Their parents believed that if they could just blend in with the crowd and be compliant, then they could go to college and they could get a good job, which is true, they did. But that also meant that they dealt with a lot of racism and they never really did anything about it. And so both of them worked really hard with me and my two sisters to help us understand that we need to stand up for ourselves, and teaching us ways and telling us that we shouldn't just stand by when we see something that's unjust.
So moving on to our final questions, what might you need or want from the adult around your school?
I would like to, like I previously spoke about, having that experience where I saw Asian Americans in the classroom on that screen and like learning about them was so great. And I feel like it would be so empowering and so amazing if that happened in every classroom. Not, of course, with just Asian American history, but with the history of all different cultures. And I know that's a lot, but I feel like right now is a great experience for me to tell a group of educators what I feel like is needed in classrooms here.
I need my teachers to help Asian students develop their leadership skills as early on as they possibly can. There's a lack of representation in management and executive positions almost everywhere. And so how are we supposed to dream of succeeding and doing things that we don't even see people that look like us doing? Asians are one of the most least likely racial groups to be promoted to those higher levels, which doesn't exactly make sense when you think that like the whole model minority myth is built around Asians being like hard workers, being reliable and accountable. And so why is there an invisible barrier that's stopping us from being promoted higher or leading people?